Ever since the Industrial Revolution, humanity has left a mark on this earth. A mark of culture, progress, and technological advancement like never before seen in history. Collectively, as a species, we've gotten smarter, we've gotten stronger, but most of all, we've gotten kinder. We've learned and improved our society to higher moral standards. We opened our eyes to social inequality, discrimination, and unfair biases within our system. Thanks to the Industrial Revolution, we progressed further in the last 100 years than our ancestors did in 1,000. It took longer for humans to switch from using bronze swords to iron swords than it did for us to switch from iron swords to nuclear bombs. With our leaps in technological advancements, one begins to wonder, what do we owe for all of it? Before we continue, let me introduce myself. My name is Hafidz Febrian from Sman2, and without further ado, let's continue on to my speech. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in the best time to be alive in history, where all of human knowledge is at your fingertips. But that's not to say that it's perfect. Our society, as it stands right now, still has a long way to go in terms of sustainability. Our society stands on an infrastructure that was built with unsustainable practices. In the name of cutting costs, they're creating major issues that would need to be dealt with sooner or later. Ladies and gentlemen, at first I asked you, what do we owe for our advancements? And as time progresses, it is becoming increasingly clear that the cost of our progress is the very planet we're inhabiting. Climate change, unpredictable weather, loss of biodiversity, just the tip of the melting iceberg that is the consequences of unchecked natural exploitation. Our progress burns the blood of the very planet we're inhabiting, cutting down its lungs for furniture and tearing down habitats of fellow inhabitants of the planet, just so that we can expand our own. Eventually, if we don't stop, we're not going to be able to pay the price. Our issues will not solve themselves. Humanity's path is set to damnation if we don't make changes to the world we live in. It is imperative that we move forward in a more sustainable way, one that ensures there is still a world worth living in for the next generation. In this day and age, sustainability shouldn't be a luxury. Realistically, it is a necessity. Ever since the Industrial Revolution, humanity has left irreversible changes to biodiversity, global temperature, and sea level rise like never before seen in history. Collectively, as a species, we have created a system that thrives on exploitation, cutting costs of production and maximizing profit above all else. If we want to live a world worth living in, we need to make immediate changes in how we live our lives. An issue of Herculean proportions must be tackled accordingly. The United Nations Environmental Program states that cities account for more than 70% of global carbon emissions. That is huge! To put that number into perspective, in 2022, global emissions were estimated to be 36.8 billion tons of carbon. And using a conservative estimate, more than 20 billion tons comes from cities alone. That's the weight of more than 4,000 Great Walls of China, the heaviest man-made object in the world. So how do we tackle such an issue? Well, fortunately for us, we have created solutions that can help and halt and mitigate carbon emissions. The approach that has been most successful at immediate carbon reduction is an approach that has been adopted by large population centers around the world. Places such as Melbourne, Paris, and Amsterdam, among many others. The approach I'm talking about is the 15-minute city, an urban planning concept where most public services, necessities, and entertainment are within reach of a 15-minute walk or bike ride from any point in the city. Now, why is this approach the most effective, you may ask? Well, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, or the OECD, A third of all urban emissions are attributed to transportation, the single largest contributor to urban emissions. In a city where everything is within a 15-minute walk or bike ride, the need to use a vehicle would go down significantly, and as a result, cuts down on emissions by a very large margin. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a solution that has worked in multiple cities worldwide. And if you're still not convinced, let's look at other examples. In Stockholm, Sweden, they promote more major factors elaborating on the advantages of a 15-minute city, such as community resilience, whereby having social services be easily accessible, they decentralize their most volatile points of interest, such as hospitals and schools, in a few. Not only does decentralization means more people have access, it also means that they create a more interconnected society, one that tends to our social needs as well. And finally, let's go back to our own nation. Indonesia has proposed plans of a 10-minute city to be implemented in its new capital in the eastern coast of Kalimantan. And according to the head of the nation's capital authority, Bambang Susantono, he proposed that a 10-minute city would allow citizens of the new capital city to be able to access public services more easily and without the need for traffic. Even the President, Joko Widodo, has made comments regarding abandoning fossil fuels in talks about the new capital, instead leading to more sustainable resources such as hydropower. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a step in the right direction. We must push for these changes as citizens of not just our own nation. This is a global issue, and as such, we must push for these changes as citizens of the world to leave behind a world worth living for the future. Thank you very much for listening to my speech. I hope you all have a wonderful evening.